chapter 22 and 28, as my Father hath appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now notice, he says in verse 29, and I appoint unto you a kingdom, as my Father hath appointed unto me. Now we know that we will be joint heirs with Yahushua and everything that he is heir to, right? When we get Psalms, the 2nd chapter, King David gives us insight as to what the Heavenly Father promised his only begotten Son. Psalms, the 2nd chapter, in the 6th verse, yet I have set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. The holy hill is Jerusalem. I will declare the decree, saith Yahweh. He said unto me, thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. All right, so the earth and the heathen within it, and all of the possessions that are in the earth are promised unto Yahushua, and he's going to share that with us. It even tells you in the 9th verse, thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, and thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. When we get the book of Revelation, the 2nd chapter, we get insight into what it means that he's going to share his kingdom with us. Just like King Solomon shared his kingdom with his people while subduing the heathen into slavery, Yahushua is going to do the same, but with much more. The whole entire planet Earth and the heathen that are within it, right? The resources, these are things that we will all have dominion of under Yahushua's reign. Revelation chapter 2 and 25. But that which ye have already hold fast till I come. This is what Yahushua means, right? By you endure with him in his temptations, right? Because following Yahushua comes with temptations, it comes with trials. But those that endure unto the end are guaranteed and promised, right, an everlasting kingdom and being joint heirs with the Son of the Most High. So he's telling us to hold fast to what he's given us. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. Let's read that again. And to he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter shall be broken to shivers, even as I have received of my Father. And I will give him the morning star, which is the second covenant, the light being put inside of us and us being transformed into heavenly bodies, just like Yahushua's body, as it says in the book of 1 John, the 3rd chapter. We know not what we shall be, but we know that when he shall come, we shall be like him. Philippians tells us he's going to change our vile bodies and make it like into his heavenly body. All right? And John the Revelator saw a vision of that heavenly body when he is described in the book of Revelation, 1st chapter. We're going to have bodies that are just like that heavenly body as he sits on the right-hand side of the Most High.
Barakatah Yahushua, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushua.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS will rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing His word and truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Rakakadash, pushing to get up out of there. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua. All right, and what I want to get into with this lesson, dealing with the importance of Iran and the build of the prophecy. I want to go into some history. We went into, certain history of Iran before, but I found another video that would be good. And it shows how, these Edomite empires, play off, these other heathens, okay, and use them as, pawns, within their game, because you have these Edomites, they're always competing for empire, when you look back over the last few hundred years, it's been different European nations, the British, the German, okay, French, the Spanish, okay, and America will come out of Britain, all right, then you had Russia, and then it would become the USSR, it had its ambition for empire, but it was broke up, but now it's been strengthened again in these latter days, for prophecy speaking with the USSR, the former USSR, which is now Russia, okay, what to be Magog in the scripture, okay, and when you go into the reason why, we even go into, these type of videos is because it links with prophecy, and I know for me, understanding the history makes right now make a lot of sense, when we get more insight on how these nations, get down, what the things will extend starts to make, more sense. You can see these things with clarity, okay, as we're watching, prophecy unfold, okay, and what we're seeing now with prophecy is everything is building up to the second coming of Yahushua, you see, which all the heathen, okay, will be put down, okay, all heathen authority will be put down at his second coming, so this ambition for empire that these heathens have, even within this new world order, you have these different nations that have, ambition for power in this new system, and we're seeing it clash, man. Okay, so we're going to get into some things. Let's get a few precepts. Give us a foundation in the spirit, and then we'll go into the video. Make you brothers, all right, and if you sisters be edified. Now, this is the book of Proverbs, chapter 20, verse 24. It says, man's goings are the Lord. How can a man then understand his own way? Okay, because we have to understand that from, the average person, the common person walking around, to the leader of a nation, all right, different generals in these militaries, and, everyone's moving according to the will of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shah. There's nothing happening outside his will, and every person plays their part to fulfill prophecy, man. The Lord has a major algorithm, far too complex to fully understand, but he's giving us a portion, of his mind, all right, to understand that everything is happening to fulfill prophecy, to fulfill his will. There's nothing that's randomly happening. When you go into, how certain nations are, in the same region, okay, the landscape of different, nations, the hardships they go through as a people, to build them to be a certain type of way, the political history they go through. The Lord is orchestrating all that, okay, to get the outcome that he wants. Okay. So when we see certain moves being made, we know that the Lord is behind everything. Okay. And he's working his will through these nations, man. And it's all going to usher in Yahushua in the righteous, everlasting kingdom. And that's the intent of the Heavenly Father through prophecy, man. Proverbs 21:1, it says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. Okay? So these different leaders that we see, these people that have power and authority amongst these nations, even the elites, okay, their mind is in the hand of the Lord. and he steers them in what direction he wants them to go to fulfill prophecy, man. Okay, certain treachery, certain backdoor deals, certain things is happening, behind the scene. Well, it's Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, okay, that's controlling, all right, the hearts of men in these high positions, man. Okay, which is causing certain events and certain alliances and certain moves to be made that all lines up with prophecy, man. There's nothing that's happening on a global stage that's not within prophecy. Everything's about the build up to the Lord's will being performed in the earth. When you go to here, Proverbs 5. Okay, let's get that Proverbs 5. No, Proverbs 19. Proverbs 19. It's a book of Proverbs 19 and 21. It said, there are many devices in a man's heart. Nevertheless, the counsel of the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Shai, that shall stand. So it's going to be the counsel of the Lord that's going to stand. And your devils, all right, and even these other heathens that have, this ambition of empire, this ambition of power, setting up, particular dynasties and things in the earth. Well, guess what? It's only the counsel of the Lord that's going to stand. If what you have planned, this is with anybody that exists, okay? If we plan anything outside of the will of the Lord, it's not going to come to pass, because we can have many thoughts, even on a small scale, we can plan to do this the next hour and never get to it. We can plan to do this next week and never get to it, okay? Because it's all within the will of the Heavenly Father. So these nations can make plans and, they want to do a fake sun and they want, by 2030 this and, 2035 we're going to have this and, no more gas cars and whatever, just throwing out random things, because this devil, a lot of things that he's spewing out, he's not going to be able to fulfill. A lot of these are just, devices of his heart. Okay, the only thing the devil was going to fulfill is the will of the Lord. What the Lord allows him to fulfill, within his short time that he has left. And we know one major event is he's going to make this Sea Hill mandate. Okay, and that's when this war is going to go haywire. Okay, which is going to cause it to go nuclear and usher in Yahweh Shai. Okay, so you can have many devices in your mind, many agendas and goals and ambition in your mind. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the counsel of the Lord that shall stand. And we're seeing the counsel of the Lord play out. Okay, and we always get it. Let's go here. Let's read in the get in NLT. Let's go here. All right, this Isaiah 46 and 9 in the NLT. It says, remember the things I have done in the past, for I alone am the Most High. I am the Most High, and there is none like me. Okay, and the Most High makes his power known, okay, through prophecy, man. You see, not only executing prophecy, but speaking these things way before he executed, showing that there's nothing that can hinder the will of the Most High. You can know about prophecy years in advance. There's nothing you can do to alter it. Okay, because he's all powerful, something that Esau is not. Okay, to be able to, all right, proclaim, all right, things in advance, and then nothing hinders, okay, the prophecy from being executed. You see, that's true power. You see, that's all powerful. That's controlling every aspect of reality when you can do that. And Esau want that power so bad, but boy, that ain't for you. Okay, nowhere near it. These little gimmicks, and he's able to do a few things. And you might put something in the Simpsons, and it might, nigga, that's on an extremely low level compared to how the Lord get down, man. Okay, verse 10, it says, only I can tell you the future before it even happens, everything I plan comes to pass, for I do whatever I wish. You see, everything that the Lord plans will come to pass, and he does whatever he wishes, man. Okay? And he has, all right, his pleasure is to establish a Hawashai, deliver a remnant of his people, men, women, and children, all right, that was predestined from the beginning for foundation, man. Okay? So let's it says, only I can tell you the future before it even happens. Everything I plan will come to pass, for I do whatever I wish. And we're seeing the plan of the Lord play out. Okay? The elites, and then the Lord has given the elites a power, an illusion of being in control. They were never really in control. They was always carrying out the agenda of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. They was never really in control. Okay? So, let's go here. Let's go ahead and get this this video. I want to go into it. Let's see. So this play is pretty interesting. We'll play most of it. Jump around a little bit, but let's play this, and it's going to walk down some history, some good history to know, going into the things that we're seeing happening. Okay, real time, especially concerning, war. Let's play this.
When you think of Iran, you probably think of this.
65 people have been killed in demonstrations that began in Tehran almost 2 weeks ago.
Some 60 Americans, bound and blindfolded, are now beginning their 6th day of captivity inside the U.S. Embassy in Tehran.
So far, more than 3,000 people have been killed, according to the World Health Organization.
Today, our perception of Iran is dominated by the regime that has controlled it for almost 15 years. But I want to show you a different Iran. The Iran that existed long before this regime. I want to show you what led up to it. Because understanding that Iran is key to understanding how we got this brutal religious regime and how it has survived for so long. You might think that the story of modern Iran is going to be about religion. But in fact, the story I'm about to tell you is about power and fear. Because for most of its history, Iran was a superpower, an advanced civilization ruling over huge swaths of land that today we call the Middle East and Central Asia.
And what he's showing right here, this is the Medo-Persian Empire. All right, because Iran, is the residue of this vast Medo-Persian Empire. You read about in the scriptures, in the book of Esther. All right, in the book of Ezra. And then you have within prophecy, the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, was known as the bear. Okay, it was known as the ram. All right, in Daniel 8th chapter. Okay, so this was one of the empires prophesied in the scriptures. Okay, and what we see today, a residue of the Persian Empire is what we know as Iran. Okay, so it has a lot of history. When they talk about, well, Iran has been around for 3,000 years, where they're going back into the time, okay, when they was the Persians. Okay, and even before then, they were known as the Persians, because Iran, even you go into the history, Iran is an older name than Persia. So them going back to the name Iran, they're going back to a time, all right, when there was a civilization even before the Persians. When you go into it, but that's play this.
They have been culturally, militarily, politically at the center of things for a very long time.
Oh, and this was starting like over 2,000 years ago. But empires rise and fall, and this empire eventually was in decline. Which gets us to our story, which starts here. I built 5 minutes with Wix. This moment, the year 1800, Iran is ruled by a family dynasty called the Qajars, and they find themselves in between two big empires, both of them expanding pretty quickly. If you look at these empires' old maps, you'll see that both of them called this place Persia. That's what outsiders called Iran. The Russian Empire had been fighting to get access to this land between these two seas. Seas that, by the way, are usable during winter, unlike Russia's other ports in the north. They're going to have to control this land if they want to control Central Asia. Russia easily defeats Iran in a few wars, and they take the land and get access to the seas. And in doing so, Russia makes Iran sign some treaties that gives Russia exclusive military control in the Caspian Sea. The treaty also says that Russian merchants can do what they want. They don't have to comply with Iranian law. It was a lot. Oh wait, and I almost forgot, if this wasn't enough, Iran has to pay Russia back for the war. So it's still the early 1800s, and Russia has just leveled up its strategic position in Central Asia, not just by conquering this land, but by solidifying major leverage within Iran. Now, over here, the British are watching. They're watching closely, and they're getting nervous. Russia now has access to these seas, and it has leverage within Iran. That means easier access to this Gulf, the Persian Gulf that leads to the rest of the world. Even worse, this land east of Iran is strategic high ground. They call it the key to India, meaning if Russia got access here, it would threaten the British Empire's most valuable colony. Iran might take this over and give Russia access. This would be a nightmare for Britain. A British general calls Russia a, quote, disagreeable and even dangerous neighbor. So the British Empire jumps into a competition for influence in this region that would come to be known as the Great Game. They fight several wars with Iran to stop them from getting the key to India. And this is where you start to see a really important pattern that we need to pay attention to. It's the reason I'm making this video. It's the thing that explains the modern day Iran and its conflict with its neighbors. The British openly say that, quote, we do not want to occupy Iran, but we cannot see it occupied by our foes, aka Russia. Iran is too big and mountainous to actually conquer. They just need to control it from the outside. Meanwhile, the king of Iran is struggling. He needs money to run his country, so he sees an opportunity to play these two competing empires off each other by selling them different forms of influence inside Iran, like the exclusive right to control key industries inside the country, basically monopolies in exchange for cash.
And this is why the West wanted a puppet government in Iran, because it would have gave America exclusive rights to all the industries in Iran. Okay, and that's how these empires do. All right, these weaker nations, well, these empires, they'll leave their government, intact. They won't conquer it, and try to run it. The British or the Russians won't try to run the Iranian government. They would run it from the outside, because it's far easier to try to run it from the outside, from having control at the top and trying to put boots on the ground, okay, and occupy it, because it's so big and mountainous, and the people there that's from there, they will give you hell, okay? The rebel fighters will give you hell. So what these empires have been doing, you had the British Empire at this time, and then Russia, okay? Which Russia is not part of the beast system, okay? But Russia has been, all right, a empire as far as being able to have influence outside its borders, okay, for a long time, and then it was at the peak of its power in the USSR. It fell off, but then what the Lord say, he would put hooks in the jaws, bring them back to their empire-like mindset, which we see today, okay? But this how these empires do, from they They love to put in puppet leaders, and these puppet leaders, okay, run a friendly government to whatever empire, that this puppet answers to. Okay, so you have this guy finna play, the Russia and British Empire against each other for his own interests, but they're just the dynamic. When you see Russia, when you see what happened in Venezuela, America is not, boots on the ground occupying Venezuela, but they run the government. Okay, so their government in Venezuela is going to have all these American friendly, when I say American friendly, American corporation friendly policies. Okay, for American corporations to get enriched, okay, through the Venezuelan resources, okay, in Venezuela, all right, industry. You see, and they do that throughout the whole earth. That's the game that these devils play throughout the whole earth. And Iran has been a major piece, all right, in this game of empire amongst these Edomite nations for a while, okay, because where it's strategically located, the Persian Gulf, okay, the Caspian Sea, the traffic, the Strait of Hormuz, okay, the traffic through India, you see, it connects India to what they call the Middle East, which really is Western Asia. So it's been a key, okay, it's been a point of conflict amongst these Edomites for a while, to have control of Iran. So let's play this some more.
These are called economic concessions, and they give the empire's influence in Iran without having to invade, all while making money in the process. Let me just tell you something really quick. The US and Iran signed a ceasefire agreement last month. But a ceasefire doesn't necessarily bring certainty. And the issue for most of us back home is that this is a story that's so complex, and the effort required to understand it can feel overwhelming or impossible. Is it a good deal? Is it a bad deal? What does it even include? Every outlet seems to cover it differently. They have a different take, a different takeaway. And if you really want to figure out what's going on, it could take hours of work. That's why I'm a big fan and have partnered for years with today's sponsor, who is Ground News. Their mission is subscribers, so there's no corporate influences deciding what you see. You can get decades British ground.news/Johnny Harris, or you can just scan the QR code here on screen. Thanks, Ground News, for sponsoring today's video. So over the next few decades, British and Russian engineers, bankers, merchants, and soldiers flood into Iran. They're exploiting natural resources, making money off everything from railroads to dams to bridges to factories. They're collecting tolls on customs and taxes. They're running lucrative banks. They build some infrastructure, but much of the benefit flows outward.
Have you ever wanted to see your home from space? With this free satellite Earth Maps tool, you can zoom right down.
Britain builds this telegraph line across the country, but it's run by British subjects, and it's a game changer for Britain. Messages that once took months can travel to India in minutes. And the Iranian king is making money for the country, but he's using a good amount of it for his personal lifestyle. By the way, I'm going to start using the Farsi word for king to describe this leader. The word is Shah. And even though this guy's basically a king, he is a king within the particular political context of Iran. It's the same reason we use like Tsar to talk about Russian kings, or Sultan to talk about an Ottoman king, or Pharaoh in ancient Egypt, or emperor in China. You get the point. So the king going forward is the Shah. Okay, so the Shah is selling all of these industries and monopolies to both empires. And then in 1890, the Shah sells Britain a total monopoly on tobacco for 50 years. Tobacco is a major part of daily social life in the country, but now everything has to go through a British middleman. This really hits a nerve. The people are starting to become fed up with outsiders controlling their country. So they band together and protest. And it works. The Shah cancels the tobacco agreement with Britain. Iranians are starting to realize that mobilizing together can bring about change. They rise up again in 1905, demanding a constitution. They want to put limits on the king's power. They want to create a parliament. They want to have representation. And they want to limit all these secret deals that the Shah has been making, selling off their country to foreigners. This is among the first constitutional revolutions in the Middle East, and it's looking like it's working. It's the early 1900s, and Iran has a parliament. The Shah is letting this happen, but very soon after, he dies. And the next guy, his son, hates the parliament, doesn't like how it's limiting his power. You know who else hates all of this democracy? The empires, especially.
But wait a minute. I thought they was all about spreading democracy. Okay? I thought they was against tyrants and spreading democracy. You see? You see how these devils are so hypocritical? You see these devils, they play this game like if you don't have a democracy, you're, inferior. And well, the Iranian people, they rose up, to form, all right, a government that balanced power within the nation. So one man didn't have all this power. Because this one man, this Shah, all right, he was selling off the nation, okay, to these empires, and the people were suffering, man. So they rose up and formed a parliament that would be a check and balance for the power of the Shah. Okay, so Iranian people will begin to benefit off their own industries, man. Okay, and not be corporate slaves, you see, to these empires, man. You see, but wait a minute, I thought, okay, it's all about liberty and freedom of speech, and they want to spread democracy and freedom of this. Nah, man, showing that it's all BS, man. They be wanting they puppet in. When they speak about the leaders, a regime is wicked and it's killing its own people. No, they're talking about they want to put a puppet in so they can exploit and extort the resources, okay, and enslave the people through economics, man. Okay, that's what they're talking about. So let's play some more.
Especially Russia, whose influence in Iran the new parliament wants to diminish. So Russia sends in 12,000 troops to support the Shah. They show up to the parliament with a bunch of cannons and they open fire on the parliament building. They kill hundreds of lawmakers and constitutional revolutionaries. They arrest many surviving revolutionaries. Others are executed. The Shah is killing his own people with the help of outsiders. And unfortunately, this is something we will see again. But the Iranians striving for democracy fight on, and they gain back some power in the country. It's the early 1900s, and this pattern that we've seen for 100 years continues, the struggle for influence in strategically located Iran. Germany enters the scene, and Russia and Britain realize that they need to team up to keep German influence out. So instead of fighting each other, they divide Iran into spheres of influence and promise not to cross into each other's area. Of course, Iranians had no say over these lines of influence. And then, a year after the empires slice up the country into spheres of influence, there's a discovery that will make Iran even more valuable to control. Oil. Lots of oil. Now, the Shah had sold the rights to explore for oil to a wealthy Englishman in 1901. And after 6 years of searching, he finally found it. Now, the British Navy would be switching from powering its ships with coal to oil. So look what happened here. Iran went from being a buffer zone that protected British trade routes and their vital colony to holding the key to Britain's naval dominance, which is their global dominance. Britain is not leaving Iran anytime soon. They would go on to establish a company we know today as British Petroleum, or BP. And of course, they send troops to protect this vital resource. Right in time.
And you see how, here it is, the British and the Russians, were, at each other. They was fighting each other over influence in Iran. But when Germany came in the picture, They teamed up against Germany to keep Germany out. And this how these devils do, man. They flip-flop sides, it's treachery, like I say, double cross. This how they do real time today. They do this now. These devils ain't, like I said, they don't have any integrity. It ain't no black and white deals that they got. Nah, anything can change in any day with these devils, man. Okay, and how they deal, because everybody is in the interest for their damn selves, man. You see, because you got these nations that are ambitious, you got these different oligarchs that are ambitious, these different elites that are ambitious. Okay, there's a lot of ambition to go around and not enough spoil, man, and that's where they clash at every time. Okay, but you just see how Germany unites the British and the Russian Empire, okay, which this is leading into the First World War around this time. So let's play this.
Time for a war to break out in Europe. When World War I begins, Iran declares neutrality. They want no part in this fight, but the fight comes to them anyway. Iran is too strategically important, especially with all this oil. The war ravages Iran's economy, and at least 2 million Iranians die from food shortages and disease caused by the war. Once again, Iranians are paying the price while the empires fight to protect their wealth and influence. After the First World War, Russia is going through a communist revolution, turning into the USSR or Soviet Union, and they leave Iran. But they're just next door. They could come back at any time. But for now, it's just the British Empire, who wants to increase their influence here even more due to the vast oil reserves they're discovering. Oil had been a game changer in World War I. It's one of the reasons the British won and Germany, who didn't have access to nearly as much oil, lost. Oil is a strategic weapon. They can't leave Iran. But Iranians are fed up with what has been over 100 years of foreigners running their country from the outside. So this military man rises up. He works with the parliament to throw out the old Shah and promises to make Iran great again, trying to get the people to remember that this was a superpower. They need to restore that greatness. His name was Reza Shah. At a time of rising nationalism everywhere, Reza Shah emphasizes Persian identity and greatness, reminding people that the majority of Iranians speak Farsi, not Arabic like much of the Middle East. And this Shah says that Iran was great before the Arabs brought Islam to Iran, so he wants to reduce the influence of religion in the society. He wants to make the secular state the only political and legal power. In 1936, he bans women from wearing any kind of cover or veil. He wants to modernize Iran and push back against all the humiliating foreign influence that has been stopping the country from being able to determine their own destiny for decades. It feels like a new era for the country. He's building hospitals and schools and roads and a university. Farsi becomes the official language. Nomads are forced to settle down. He builds a railway across the country. He builds a strong centralized bureaucracy, a secular court system, a powerful army, and he demands that outsiders call it Iran instead of Persia. And he crushes anyone who opposes his modernizing efforts. Okay, but not too fast. This is where we're going to see that pattern again. As part of all of this modernizing effort, the new leader brings in German engineers. And look at the date. Back in Europe, Germany just started a war with its neighbors. This is World War II. So here comes Russia and Britain again. They demand that Reza Shah expel the Germans, who could easily sabotage these weapon supply lines that the Soviets need to fight back against Germany in Europe. Or maybe they could sabotage Britain's valuable source of fuel for the war. Reza Shah doesn't want to give in to the big empires. He's done with that. So he stalls, tries to negotiate with them, tries to play these empires off each other, and tries to remain neutral once again. But the British and Soviets are not having it. They pull a familiar act of pressure, this time invading Iran and forcing Reza Shah off the throne and into exile in South Africa. They replace him with his 22-year-old son, who is more willing to do what they want. So much for getting rid of foreign influence. During World War II, Iran is once again too weak to resist and too important to be left alone. a strategic corridor, a buffer zone between empires, a massive oil reserve, and these big powers occupy huge swaths of the country, all a part of their global chessboard. Okay, so World War II is over, and I want you to pay attention to this guy, Mohammad Reza Shah. Remember, he's the new Shah, the one that the Soviets and the British installed right in the run-up to World War II. Yeah, he's a big part of the next chapter of this story, so just keep an eye on him. Oh, and let's update his photo. He's not 21 anymore. World War II is over. The Iranian people come out of World War II with even more motivation to stop this seemingly forever cycle of outsiders controlling and ravaging their country. Their democracy movement is now 4 decades old, and the people are developing a stronger and stronger culture of protest, intellectual discourse, politics, national pride, but it's never been able to take root because it's always disrupted by outsiders meddling in the country. And look, even though the war is over and the British are decolonizing around the world, they're still here, pulling huge amounts of oil from Iranian soil, protecting it with troops, and shipping it around their empire. And
see that? Strait of Hormuz. All right, when we talk about the Strait of Hormuz, that's that right there. All right, and what you have now as a leader at this time is a British puppet. All right, Mohammad Reza Shah. Okay, and pretty much, and see what these empires do. You know, these larger, you know, these more powerful Edomite governments. They have their agents and spies come in, you know, and they flipped them, you know, because they had ran his father off. Okay, they invaded, you know, put his father in exile, but they had already been grooming him up. You know, they had already been talking to him and grooming him up, telling him, look, you know, your father is holding back, you know, progress. You know, we can get so much done. We can make a lot of money for us and for your country. Your father, he's too stuck in his way. You know, he's outdated. You the guy. You know how Esau do. Okay? And British and Russian troops came in. Okay, those Soviet Union troops ran off his father and put him in power. So now Britain has their puppet in charge of Iran. You know, and they're able to continue to just come get this oil, okay, and ship it through the Strait of Hormuz on the world market. And that's what these devils are about, man. They're about getting these resources from the locals, okay, and putting it on the world market. And the locals that walk around on top of the resources every day don't benefit from it at all, okay? But it's these foreign Edomite corporations, they come in, okay, they build, and then when they say they build infrastructure, they're building hotels and bridges and cities so they can steal. Okay, and for Esau can have somewhere to lay his head while he's stealing. Okay, they build just enough infrastructure so they can steal with these bridges and pipelines, and you know, they might throw you a library, you know, in the movie theater in the mix. Okay, you see. But ultimately, you know, they build enough infrastructure just so these niggas can steal, man. So let's play a little more.
the Shah is okay with this. Because remember, the British installed this Shah. They're friends. But the people really don't like this Shah. He's Britain's Shah, not Iran's. He's a symbol of more of the same. Foreigners controlling the country. But you know who they do like? This guy. Mohammad Mossadegh. He's a political leader, and he rises up with a strong voice, calling for Iranians to reclaim their country. Mossadegh wants to reject all imperial powers so that Iran can chart its own course. And item number one on his list is oil. Britain is pumping loads of oil out of Iran, but Iran is only getting 16% of the company's profits. So the Iranian parliament asks to renegotiate the oil deal to more of an even split. They want it to be more like 50-50. Britain's open to negotiation. They'll give more money, but not 50%. So the Iranian prime minister accepts this. But when he goes to parliament for approval, who stands up to reject it? Mohammad Mossadegh, who argues that this valuable resource is Iran's. They should control it completely. Uh-oh. Britain's starting to get nervous. They say, okay, fine, we'll do the 50-50 split. But it's too late. The political and public momentum towards Iran getting full control is too strong. The prime minister who was opposed to nationalization of the oil gets assassinated. And who does the parliament elect to be the new prime minister? Mossadegh. Mossadegh looks like the guy who's going to finally put an end to foreign control, to usher in a new Iran, one that's run by the people, not by the empires. It's 1951, and Mossadegh's proposal to take back the oil company goes to parliament, and they approve it. And now Britain is really freaking out. The US and the World Bank step in to try to mediate, try to find a peaceful deal, but neither side gives in. Britain will pay more, but they will not give up control. And Mossadegh won't budge on Iranians controlling their oil completely. Britain then tries to punish Iran by boycotting their oil, sending Royal Navy warships to this choke point in the Persian Gulf to deter any tankers that are considering transporting oil out of Iran.
So these devils, okay, they've closed the straits before. You see? These goddamn devils done closed the straits before. Okay? When things didn't go in their way, and this is the devil's power. You see, so the Strait of Hormuz has been, a political choke point for a long time. And that's why when we look at these things, these events, and these wars, and these conflicts, they have hundreds of years of history when you go into it. It's not a random thing. It's not just, like the elites pick up the phone, like, y'all niggas go to war today. Nah, man, this is an ongoing timeline, between the ambition of these different empires, to expand and control, trade and resources. Okay. Iran has just been a major chess piece on the board amongst these major empires, man, for a long time. You see? But it's always it's a lot of history now. The elites do, fabricate certain things, and they manipulate certain things. Okay. But then you have to understand, like, these conflicts have hundreds of years of storyline and narratives that's been ongoing, okay, and developing, man. It's all connected, you see? So it's all play, and it's all the will of the Lord. And the Lord is orchestrating all this because he has prophecy. All this is being orchestrated because the Lord has certain prophecy that he wants to play out. So he puts certain leaders, he allows certain coups to happen, he allows, certain militaries to become strong, he allows certain nations to be in control over certain checkpoints and choke points for the sake of prophecy, man. So let's play this some more.
Hoping that this will hit them economically and give them leverage in the negotiation. But Iran doesn't budge. Oil is the ultimate symbol of Iran taking the country back from this 150 years of foreign meddling. So Britain decides it's time to play dirty. The American CIA is in the middle of the Cold War, trying to counter Soviet influence around the world. And the CIA's Middle East guy is in London. The British intelligence agency gets a meeting with him, and they try to convince him that Mossadegh could be an asset to the communist Soviet Union. The brand new President Eisenhower wants to do anything he can to counter Soviet influence anywhere on Earth. What if Mossadegh is sympathetic to the Soviets and they let them get access to the oil? We can't have that. And they conclude that they need to get rid of Mossadegh. This is basically a rerun of several previous episodes of this story, where the big empires use Iran as a playing field to counter the influence of their geopolitical rival.
I am addicted to this electrical engineering game. I downloaded it out of curiosity. Now I keep coming back to understand.
So the CIA allocates $12 million in today's money to do whatever it takes to get Mossadegh out. They sneak people into the country who start quietly bribing politicians, paying organizers to bring crowds into the street against Mossadegh. They give money to newspapers to attack him. And when the moment's right, the Western-friendly Shah steps up and tries to fire Mossadegh from being prime minister. And it totally backfires. The people keep supporting Mossadegh, and the Shah flees the country for Rome. The CIA regroups and continues their secret campaign of influence, and they eventually get enough of the military to flip. Getting the military on board is usually the defining feature of a coup. And now enough of the Iranian military supports the Shah and not Mossadegh. They go to Mossadegh's house, they arrest him, they run him through a military trial and charge him for treason because he didn't obey when the Shah tried to fire him. They sentence him to life under house arrest. He is officially silenced. And then the Shah, remember the same Shah that Britain installed in World War II to be their Shah, he flies back into the country and takes total power once again. He remains Britain's guy, but now he's loyal to the Americans who just reinstalled him as the leader by throwing out the person that the democracy had chosen. Britain keeps control of Iran's oil business, but they do start sharing 50% of the profits with Iran. And to avoid future backlash, the British divide their share of oil between other big nations, giving a huge share to the US, who had just spent a lot of money to help them save the oil. Mossadegh almost did it. He almost broke the cycle of outsiders controlling Iran's government, resources, and economy. But once again, he was thwarted by the more powerful empires. And the Shah goes on to do a version of what his dad did to Iran, to modernize the country and the society in a Western direction, trying to reduce the influence of Islam on the society. He allows women to vote, increases rural education, but does all of this with an iron fist. He eliminates his political opposition, he censors the press, and he imposes Western dress and lifestyle on the society. The CIA helps him create a secret police that he uses to capture and torture and spy on anyone who opposes his regime. And the Shah gives Americans in Iran legal immunity, which is a perfect echo of the humiliating treaties that Iran was forced to sign with Russia over 100 years earlier. And the oil keeps flowing. Iran is getting rich, but its tens of millions of people are becoming increasingly resentful that their leader is clearly a Western puppet.
And when it says Iran is getting rich, it's speaking about this nigga, man, and his cronies around him. America, the British, the French, and the few, all right, elites of Iran, all right, that's in cahoots with this guy, all right, Mohammed Shah. Okay, they're the ones getting rich. Iran, the people. Why would it, if they was getting rich, why would they keep rising up? No, okay. You had these Edomite, all right, these European, all right, and American Edomite companies getting rich, okay, and they was giving him a kickback. You see, because the money goes through U.S. and British banks, and then they give this nigga a kickback, and he get to spread it out amongst, you know, his cronies up top. Okay, that's how they work. You see, but you see how the CIA, you know, they just meddle, you know, in all the world affairs, man. But the script say he never keep it at home. Okay, because he was, you know, this thing about these Edomites, man, they be having so much wickedness going on at the same time. And now what we're seeing is finally done caught up to this nigga, man. You know, all this wickedness that he has going on, because this is just one arena. Because while he's doing this, he got more wickedness going on in Panama, Guatemala, South Africa, the Congo, and this, you know, Australia, Northern, you know, South Vietnam. You know, he's like, God damn. He's all type of wickedness going on throughout the earth at the same time. You know, and what's happening is finally catching up to him, man. You see? So, yeah, let's play a little more.
And one of the most vocal critics of all of this, Ruhollah Khomeini, a religious leader who abides by a strict conservative interpretation of Shia Islam. He starts giving speeches against the Shah. Now, if you look at Khomeini's speeches, and I have looked at and listened to many, you start to see frustration not just with the Shah, but frustration and anger at this entire story that we've been telling so far. These years and decades and centuries of Iran being sold to outside powerful empires. empires have, quote, invaded Iran and occupied our country. The property of the people was exposed to danger. The government has sold our independence, committed treason against this country and against Islam. Before it was the British that brought our misfortune, and now it's the Soviets on one hand and the Americans on the other. All of our miseries are caused by those imperialists. He calls on the religious leaders to rise up to avoid, quote, this nation to be slaves of Britain one day and America the next. He says that a number of foreign states carry off our oil after drawing it out of the ground. And the negligible sum that they pay to the regime, they have installed returns to their pockets by other routes. They have reduced the Iranian people to the level lower than an American dog. And all in all, the people must, quote, throw the Shah out of Iran. It's a call for revolution. Now, I told you at the beginning that modern-day Iran is not all about religion and religious beliefs, and that's true. And yet, this man, Khomeini, is a religious cleric, an imam, a leader in the Shia Islamic tradition. And in that tradition, there is a particular emphasis on martyrdom. So while Khomeini's rhetoric echoes a lot of the anti-imperial revolutionary language that was happening, by the way, in a lot of parts of the world at this time, Khomeini's revolutionary language is anchored particularly in religious doctrines of the oppressed rising up against the oppressor, divine justice, skepticism of secular governments. And this mix of religious and revolutionary language resonates among the people. Khomeini is arrested and almost executed, but the people rise up in protest. The Shah responds with soldiers and open fire. The Shah's people worry that executing Khomeini will make the uprising worse. So Khomeini is released, but forced to leave the country. He's now in exile, but he continues to spread his message to the Iranian people by smuggling sermons into the country on cassette tapes. Now his speeches about imperialists imposing an unjust order on Iran are echoing through villages and mosques. People are listening to the cry to overthrow the tyrannical and corrupt regime. Meanwhile, thanks to surging oil prices, things are going pretty well for the Shah over the next decade. He's developing the economy. There's new infrastructure, roads, dams, ports, airports. There's a middle class that's emerging. There's schools and universities. Students are going abroad to study. The US even encourages Iran to start a nuclear energy program.
Oh, wait a minute. So America encouraged them to start a nuclear program? Why? Because they was in bed with the whore. You see? They was in bed with the whore, to where you have, I say, the elites of the nation, all right, the upper class of the nation, they can benefit, but everyone else is impoverished, man. You see? So you see that when Iran was in bed with America, okay, America was all behind it. When Iran was allowing this country, okay, to be to be pillaged, to be a spoil, okay, to these American and British corporations, it was all good. Okay, here it is now. This guy here had tanks in the street now, and this is where we're going to see the regime, the Ayatollah, okay, getting installed, and that's the regime that the West hates, and we're going to see why they hate it. Okay, so the current regime is the Ayatollah, which this guy Khomeini, he's the first Ayatollah. He's going to be the first Ayatollah. Okay, and he's going to remove, okay, America and the British from Iran. Okay, now what do these devils do? Because a nation wants to benefit off its own resources, it puts sanctions on it so it can destroy the economy, and then they can say, well, this leader hates his people. This leader, see the things that they say that people like Gaddafi and Saddam and Fidel Castro, all right, Chavez down there in Venezuela, okay, the people that they proclaim, them to be, actually be the way that their puppets act towards the people. Okay, they put the puppets that they have in place. They actually put tanks on the streets against the people. Okay, they actually enrich themselves while the people suffer. Okay, but then they'll flip it and say, well, this is how this person is doing it, when it be the exact opposite, man. You see? So they didn't have no problem. Here it is. Trump told the Iranian people, we're coming to save you. But wait a minute. What about when the Shah had tanks in the street? Okay? Putting the military against the people. But as long as America and these different European corporations can get profit off the nation, they don't care what happened in the nation. Okay, they don't care what happens in the country as long as they're able to get profit out of it, man. When they stop getting profit, now you start to see the propaganda. Okay, and that's how these devils roll. So let's play this.
The Shah also spends a lot of the oil money on building a huge military. He becomes the #1 buyer of military equipment on Earth, becoming completely reliant on US weapons, and Iran becomes a significant military power in the Middle East. The Shah is also spending money on opulent oil-funded palaces, throwing extravagant parties in the middle of the desert, where guests fly in on helicopters, and French chefs serve luxury food. The rest of the country is watching this, and resentment is simmering. Khomeini is continuing to rally people from his exile, and by the late 1970s, people are routinely taking to the streets. Like the tobacco protests in 1890, this is transcending any one group. People from all walks of life are coming together. The shop owners, the working class, the students, the intellectuals, the religious. They don't all agree on what the future of Iran should be, but they all agree on one thing, that the Shah is a foreign puppet who can no longer be tolerated. He's losing control. He tries to crack down by declaring martial law to stop the protesters, but they don't stop coming. Even after the military opens fire, the oil workers then go on strike, which is a huge blow to the government, who relies on a constant flow of oil for its revenue. And as a last-ditch effort, the Shah tries to appoint a moderate opposition figure as prime minister, but it's too late. The people have turned against the monarchy. It's January 1979, and the Shah flees the country once again. He claims he's only going on vacation, and that he would be back, but he would never return to Iran. This is Khomeini's moment. He flies back to Tehran, and he's greeted by crowds of millions of people.
We all need love and love.
This is what a revolution looks like. He gets the military to flip, to stop supporting the old government, and he quickly consolidates some control over the chaos. Foreigners flee, especially British and Americans, who are enemy #1. Though the revolutionaries do seize 66 Americans and hold them hostage for over a year, Khomeini dissolves the old government, the monarchy, the parliament, and he replaces it with a new system, one that he developed while in exile. Hey, if you're still watching, you are probably somebody who wants to better understand the world. So do the thousands. This is a huge moment in the story.
So this is the beginning of the regime that runs the country today. And he's going to go into how it's set up. He's going to explain, the government, how Khomeini, he's the one, the pioneer of this government we see today. All right, the first Ayatollah. Okay, and how he sets it up, you can tell, while he was in exile, he had plenty of time to think, and the Lord was dealing, because the Lord needs Iran to be in a particular position for prophecy, man. Iran is a tool that's being used, and I always look at it as the Lord is heavily involved in these things because of prophecy's sake. Okay, so let's play a little more.
The people just overthrew a Western-backed regime, not with force and a war, but through sheer will of the population. 40 million people who are tired of this story of being controlled by outsiders. I want to take a moment to show you what they built next. The inside of the regime. Because the regime that Khomeini built is the regime that today exists. It's the one that has been fighting a war with Israel and the United States. And it is the one that is more difficult to topple than outsiders believe. And I want to show you why. This system is unique. And that's because it's a reaction to Iran's story up to this point. This is a system that protects the country against foreign intervention. The intervention that Khomeini and his religious followers see as the source of moral corruption in the society. To prevent that from happening again, Khomeini says that there must be religious leaders who sit at the top of the system, specifically this one leader, the supreme leader, the guardian of the system. Iran's new constitution gives him a lot of power. He gets to appoint all these other government leaders. But look, there's also a democracy tucked into this system. People vote. They elect members of a parliament. They elect a president. They even elect the 88 people who have the power to appoint or remove the supreme leader. There's even courts to protect people's rights. This seems like a balanced democracy, right? Well, not quite. This is actually what we call a filtered democracy. It's filtered through religion. There are at least 2 religious councils who are appointed by the supreme leader that control who actually gets to run for office or which laws get passed. And once you dive into it, you see that this whole system is built to prevent any future revolutions from overthrowing this religious government. The system has multiple ways to keep people in line. Local religious leaders and state media carry the regime's message. There's a morality police that enforces dress codes like women covering their hair. And in addition to a conventional military that protects the borders and deters invasions, the regime itself has its own military. It's called the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and it has its own ground forces, air force, and navy, all dedicated to the survival of the regime. And perhaps most effective, they have this volunteer militia that helps exert control of the regime inside every city, village, town, and neighborhood in Iran. And finally, one last special unit in the Revolutionary Guard Corps is dedicated to spreading Iran's power and influence outside of Iran's borders. All in all, Iran has over 500,000 active military personnel and well over 1 million if you include the voluntary militia networks. And so, since 1979, this system has survived. It has survived invasion. It survived a bloody 8-year war with Iraq right after the revolution. And to deter anyone else in the region from threatening their survival, the Iranian regime keeps expanding its proxy network throughout the Middle East, funding militias that help it survive. Then, the regime survived the death of its founder in 1989, and the new supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, carried on with this same system. The regime has grown more and more unpopular over the decades, which has led to mass protests, but the regime survives every time. And during all of this, Iran has been watching as their formal rivals and their neighbors build the ultimate survival tool. Iran realized that if they really wanted the ultimate deterrent from foreign intervention, they too needed nuclear weapons. So, for the last 40 years, this has been a story of a paranoid regime who is resentful towards the West and supercharged with apocalyptic religious fervor, secretly pursuing nuclear weapons and using its big network of militias that it funds throughout the region to project power in the Middle East, to threaten its enemies, all in the name of stopping this centuries-long cycle of foreign intervention in their country. All while the West, specifically Israel and the United States, try to stop them through a combination of cutting them off the global economy, making diplomatic deals, and most recently through a full-on war.
Hey, are you trying to get good at software engineering? Well, you should go to boot.dev and create a free account.
These most recent wars between Iran and its...
Yeah, so that's pretty much the point with that. I thought that was a good watch, but yeah, man, you can see today how, Iran is critical for Russia and China, because America you know, it wants to be able to choke out, you know, Russia and China, because they want to break up Russia, you know, and they want, you know, China to be more subservient, you know, to the West. Now they got deals where they deal with each other, but those deals are disintegrating. You know, when you go into certain deals between Russia, China, and America, those deals, you know, are becoming less and less, almost to nothing. All right, because it's time for war. You know, they deal with each other. A lot of these nations have relationships of convenience, and all of them have, you know, all of them agree with this technocracy. All of them agree towards a digital system. You know, let's say, you know, China being, you know, years ahead of most other nations, especially America. Okay, but what we're seeing is going back to ambition of empire. You know, and the Lord has strategically set up, okay, for these nations, you know, to have a reason to fight, all right, for power, you know, going into this new system. You see, because it's the Lord that orchestrates this conflict. Matter of fact, let's get a couple precepts, you know. So we're watching our power at work, you know, and all these things play into prophecy. All right, when you go into geopolitics and things, you know, there's much more, you know. So when you go into geopolitics, it's a hell of a rabbit hole, you know. But the main thing, we link these things to prophecy, all right, because let's go here. Let's get about two more precepts. This is Jeremiah 50. All right. This is Jeremiah 50:9. It said, "For lo, I will raise and cause up to come against Babylon an assembly of great nations from the north country." And it's beginning with Russia. Okay. So now, you know, just as, you know, Russia and British were, you know, squabbling for control over Iran, now it's Russia and America. Okay. Now it's Russia, China, and America. You know, they all have major interests in Iran. Okay. Which causes Russia and China to be Iran friendly. Okay. Because they have it's a pro-China, Russia regime that's in power. Okay. It says, "And they shall set themselves in array against her. From thence shall she be taken. The arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man. None shall return in vain." Yeah. So these alliances that we're seeing happening, okay, is the Lord orchestrating these alliances, man. You know, because to these nations, this makes sense to them for their ambition. You see, as we look at it from a viewpoint of prophecy, they're looking at it from a viewpoint of ambition. Okay, the nation, they want to spoil each other. They want to, all right, take over trade routes and resources. You see, empower themselves going into this new world order. But the Lord has another agenda. Okay, now America is going to be destroyed by this alliance of nations. Okay, from the east, you know, these kings of the east. But then Yahushua, you know, he's going to come and destroy them all. So that's why you go Zephaniah 3:8. All right, this is the book of Zephaniah, chapter 3, verse 8. It said, "Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations," because all these nations are being gathered, okay, for the purpose of Yahushua to come and put down all these heathens, man. America being destroyed is just a part of the plan, okay? This is the second part where Yahushua enters the scene. You see, it said that I may assemble the kingdoms to pour upon them my indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy, man. You know, so Yahushua is coming back, you know, to destroy the militaries of the heathen. Okay, the militaries of the earth will be destroyed at the second coming of Yahushua. Okay, and this is what the Lord's agenda was from the beginning, even before the foundation of the world, man. It's just been the chain of events leading to this moment, leading to this time in prophecy, man. The second coming of Yahushua. So we're in some beautiful times, man. You know, I say these things help me understand it better. You know, I pray it was edifying. for you brothers, you few sisters, but I'll leave it there. So Lord will, you brothers and you few sisters edified. Till next time I say shalom. Yashala, Baba, soon, shalom.